Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the school committee on any item which is not on tonight's agenda? All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any item that you would like to pull from the consent agenda for further discussion? Could we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. I'm going to reserve the chairperson's remarks and business until after the student report.
Hello. Oh, sorry. I'm Kesey Ross. I'm filling in for Courtney, who has a practice with her college field hockey coach, so that's very exciting. So upcoming events, or past events to start, was March 6th through 9th was the Young Frankenstein Spring Musical, which was amazing. I don't know if you got the chance to see it, but they do such an amazing job every single year. It's incredible. And then on March 10th was the Spring Sports Parent Player Coaches Meeting. March 11th was the NHS Blood Drive. And when I went and did it, and they told us that every pint donated helps at least 3 people in need, so it's very fulfilling. March 12th, today, senior Devin Schumann will be competing in a French oratorical contest at Salem's Club Richelieu. And so they're there right now with Madame Simmons, Madison Williams, Rachel Hall, and Sydney Ribicki. March 13th, tomorrow, is the District Arts Festival, which I'm sure you saw the art in the hallway as you walked in. Students from all 3 elementary schools and the middle school will come to the high school for a day full of performing arts. March 14th is the Leaders Club Volleyball Tournament, as well as Student Council's Make Your Mark Bingo Night. So once a month, the Student Council goes to a elderly home and helps out. So this Friday, we're going to Oak Ridge to play bingo, and the prize is a trip to come to a Triton game or a performance of some sort that they would like to see. March 17th, next Monday, the spring sports begin. March 19th is the Foreign Language National Honor Society induction ceremony, which will be 7 p.m. in the library. And we have 20 new members to induct, which is exciting. We keep growing larger and larger every year. April 4th is the junior prom at the Black Swan in Georgetown. April 8th is the Junior Credit for Life Fair, which is a great opportunity. I did it last year, and it's a huge eye-opening event of how much there is to consider financially once you get out of school. And then some congratulations to go out to our cheering team who won the Division III state championships this past Saturday and will compete at Nationals in April in Florida. The Drama Festival Peace Reign will compete in Western Massachusetts for the state semifinals. And senior Curran Callawart and junior Sarah Collins will go to the DECA Nationals in Atlanta based on their presentations this past weekend at the state competition in Boston.
Does anyone have any questions or comments on this report? Thank you very much. Before we get into the discussion, the deliberations on the FY15 budget, there are a couple of things that we need to do. First of all, I've just been handed letters from the town of Newbury and from the town of Rowley The Town of Newbury, dear Chairman Choate, the Newbury Board of Selectmen respectfully request your committee not take a final vote on the proposed FY15 budget until Wednesday, March 19th, to allow time for a meeting of our local legislators and boards of selectmen. Sincerely, Joseph Story, the second chair. From the Town of Raleigh, dear Chairperson Choate, this letter is a formal request from the Raleigh Board of Selectmen to the Triton Regional School District School Committee to lower the Town of Raleigh's proposed fiscal 2015 assessment increase from $498,162 to $300,000. This amount is 50% of the town's new tax revenue for fiscal 2015 and reflects a 3.78% assessment increase. The Triton Regional School District budget is increasing at unsustainable levels. The Town of Raleigh has always been a staunch supporter of public education. The town contributes well above the required minimum contribution level to the Triton Regional School District. Under the budget scenario presented to us, the town will be paying $1,800,959 over the required minimum contribution. There has been minimal outreach by the school committee to the town during the season's budget process. Raleigh officials have participated to the extent possible in any opportunities to work with the school committee, district communications committee in establishing fair and equitable assessment increases. With no district communications committee meetings this budget season, Raleigh officials were not given any opportunity to have frank and open discussions on the school budget and the town's budget. We would have welcomed such an opportunity. In closing, the Raleigh Board of Selectmen respectfully asks you to consider reducing the proposed assessment increase to $300,000. Otherwise, the difference of $198,162 will need to be placed in our Proposition 2.5 override ballot question this spring. We ask for your thoughtful consideration of our request. Sincerely, Robert Snow, Chairman. Thank you very much. I appreciate the request, but legally we are bound to take a vote tonight on our final budget. However, we have a resolution that we would like to, I will read it to you. Resolved that the school committee approves the fiscal year 15 final budget as presented, subject to its subsequently reopening the budget at the formal request of the towns of Newbury, Raleigh, and Salisbury, based on the state making additional revenue available to the school committee above that assumed in the approved FY15 final budget. Now, the full committee, I don't think, has seen that. So I would like to first ask if anybody on the committee has any questions or comments regarding that resolution. Paul?
I just have a question. How and when was that generated?
How was it generated?
Yeah, the resolution that you have in your hand?
I'm going to let Christopher answer that question.
I drafted it this morning.
So essentially, you're saying we're going to vote on the budget tonight, but if the state numbers change, we're going to reopen it in the future?
By law, we have to vote on the final budget tonight. Robin?
Well, I just want to make a couple comments so that people know the history of how we got to this point. That last evening there was a meeting in Newbury for the Board of Selectmen from the towns of Salisbury, Raleigh, and Newbury to discuss the budget. And I believe the town of Newbury voted officially, because they had a quorum and they could, to request that we extend our deadline, which ironically, as a committee, I think you'll all remember that we made requests to the town several months ago to push the deadline back to April 1st, which we've done in past years because we all get better numbers as we get closer to April 1st. And Newbury and Salisbury selectmen did approve that. Raleigh voted not to extend that deadline. Last night, they only had the vote of the town of Newbury, and so without Raleigh and Salisbury voting and submitting that request to postpone, we can't legally divert from our regional agreement. But because we've received that request orally today, and now we have this letter tonight in writing, we want to respect those requests. We want to think about, because it's to all of our benefit to a degree to have better numbers going into creating the town assessments. And so Mr. Farmer said that we can't not vote tonight legally based on our regional agreement, but how can we legally keep this open so that if we do get additional funding, then that money can go back to the towns as opposed to just trickling through to E&D or sitting in our budget. So the way around that is this resolution. We have the power, once we vote tonight, to revisit it if we get additional funding and want to reduce the town's assessment, as opposed to just letting it sit there and we can't spend it anyway. So that is the 24-hour history behind this resolution.
And that's probably, Paul, why this was done quickly, because everything has been happening very quickly. Does anyone else have any questions or comments about that resolution?
Is it my understanding that we can't, when you reopen it, you can only go down, or is that only, like, you can't go any higher? You can't vote to make the budget any higher. You can only make the budget to go lower, or is that, does that apply in this case? I know it applies at town meeting and such, but that apply here too?
We would, yes. We would not raise it.
No,
We would
but
lower.
but legally, is there some?
We can't raise it.
Right.
But clearly the intention would be that if the towns formally request the school committee to reopen it on the basis of there being additional funds available to the school district, then we could adjust the assessments to the towns, that any funds, additional funds, could be used to reduce the assessments to the towns.
Right, no, I understand the premise that it would go down. I understand that, but I don't think that we even have the ability to go up, just so the public knows that we wouldn't reopen it and say, hey, now we need another 1.3 million or something like that.
Dina?
Since this has not been done before, at least since I've been on this committee, has this been looked over by legal counsel, or has this been done elsewhere before? I'm not opposed to this. I think it's a great idea, and I think it gets around the problem that Robin had mentioned about trying to extend the deadline, but I just want to make sure that we're doing it by the book.
No attorney, other than the attorney opposite me at the moment, has
Don't
had a
drag me into this.
has had a chance to review this. There could be some personal injuries down the road. No. So what this morning, when we learned of the situation, Assistant Superintendent Forget and I had a discussion, and I have tried to develop language which would achieve the town's intention from their request, but do so in a way that respects the regional agreement, so that nobody could come to us and say, yes, but you didn't follow the regional agreement. So I believe that the language you have gets us to where the towns would like us to be. It has the potential to keep the budget open, but that is predicated on there being more funds available to the district. There may be more funds available to the towns, but clearly we have no authority over that. But we could review the budget if the district revenue was increased.
Do you know if any other district has done anything similar to
I
this?
do not.
Thank you.
I do want to remind people that the budget can, the amount can be lowered on the floor of the town meeting.
I was just going to ask Mr. Forget, based on your knowledge of the regional agreement, you have said to me that we can reduce the assessment to the towns with really out of formal anything. I mean, if what we vote tonight, even if, let's say we take this resolution and we run it by, we have to vote tonight. There's just no way around it legally. We have to vote tonight. There's time to have the attorney look at the resolution to be sure that the language is correct. If there is any issue that we can't use this resolution to reopen, even if we don't reopen, we can reduce the town's assessments, correct?
Informally. So if when you set a budget and it's appropriated on the town floor, we can't spend any more than that. And so in some instances, it's been used no more than or up to an amount. So if the agreement of the committee is long about January 29th, we learn that we're going to get 50 per student rather than 25, and we get an additional $70,000, we can just reduce the total operating budget or reduce the assessment by that $70,000.
Probably didn't mean January.
Sorry, June.
June.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
I hope maybe it'll take till January. But in June, when the budget's finalized, we can just reduce that and reduce the assessment to the towns. I, I honestly, I think that even without the resolution, if the towns request that the committee open the budget up again and the committee votes to open it again, there's really no legality whatsoever. I think this accomplishes it by not needing any more votes. So if the letters are received and we do get more Chapter 70, that you're then ready to schedule a meeting and say, let's approve a different budget. So I don't think there's any legal danger, quite honestly.
Can you just clarify, Brian, you just said without needing more votes? What do you mean by that?
Well, so if you're setting this resolution, you're agreeing, the committee is voting to say we're approving the budget, but if we receive formal requests from all three towns, because it can't be 2 of 3, if we receive a formal voted request from all 3 towns, then you go ahead and schedule the meeting, and you've already said you would do that, versus needing a meeting to say you're going to reopen the budget. Does that make sense?
Does anyone else have any questions or comments on the resolution? What I would like to do is ask for a motion to adopt this.
You probably need to review changes to the budget before you get to that.
That says you're adopting
Because
the
we have
budget.
documentation that reduces from the tentative budget by $250,000.
Yes. Okay, we will hold off on that. I would like to have a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing contract negotiations with the TRTA. We will return to open session. This will be brief.
I make a motion to enter an executive session for the purpose of discussing negotiations with union personnel and to return to open session.
I'll second.
Roll call vote. Paul?
Yes.
Suzanne? Linda? Dina? Yes. Robin? Yes. Debbie? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll be back as fast as we can. Thank you for your patience. Since we last met, there have been some changes from the tentative budget as you saw it. And so I would like to ask Christopher and Brian, or Brian and Christopher, to please go over those changes with you.
Brian.
Brian.
All the changes that I will go over are in the budget document. In the narrative, which is pages 1 through 10, we did kind of a red line strike through so you can see explicitly what the changes are from the tentative budget to the final budget. But rather than walking through page by page, you have a single two-sided sheet that looks like this. It says Final Budget Change Summary. And I'll just take you through that paper as that highlights. Yes, I'm sorry. It's just the narrative. The pages 1 through 10. That's the red line. The rest of the document is accurate how it is finalized. So looking at the budget, the tentative budget spending plan was finalized at $37,254,480. Since that time, as we talked about last week, we had already a weekend had already identified close to $150,000 in savings, and so at this point we've been able to trim down $357,747. So this sheet outlines how we got to that number. At this point, we do have our certified excess and deficiency. It was certified at roughly $756,000. Last year, we were certified about $630,000. So we put about $120,000 into our excess and deficiency for the current year. We're now proposing that we use $100, roughly what we put into it, to offset the budget for next year. Again, by putting excess and deficiency up to $100,000, we're creating a gap because excess and deficiency is our only reserve, and we're using one-time funds to offset operating expenditures. That being said, I think it's prudent at this point to put $100,000 of our E&D towards the general operating expenditures. As far as retirements go, the projections that were made, we were using a figure of $205,000 back in, that came from early January. Whether those were bad assumptions on my part, the actual savings, when we factor in the three, they are now confirmed retirees in the elementary classroom, with all longevity, with full salary, it's a total savings of $238,091. So I had made some conservative assumptions and they were low. So the total savings is $238,000, which means an additional savings of $33,091. That represents those three retirements. As far as our workman's comp, we budgeted, in January, we budgeted our workman's comp rates based on our payments that we will make this year. We got our renewals very 1st of March, and we have a 2009 year of claims that will fall off. We had a 329% loss ratio. So that's bad. And so when that falls off the rates, we will actually go back to what we had budgeted for this year. So I can pull that $40,000 of proposed increases out of the equation at this point. Our dental insurance, we had budgeted for a 7.5% increase on the recommendation of our provider. That actually came in at a 0. However, due to some adjustments in enrollments, it was a savings of, or I had proposed additional costs of roughly $42,000 and change. It's actually, I can pull about $32,000 of that out, and the net increase over last year will end up being about $10,000 and change. We did move an additional salary. It's a salary from Newbury Elementary School into the Choice Funding revolving account. So that's a general fund savings of $34,066. We're pushing the limits, and basically at this point we're assuming we're going to spend roughly what we're going to take in for next year through Choice. Generally, we like to buffer a little low, and just to make sure that because we're making assumptions about school choice in revenues. But I think that, again, we're pushing a little more closely than I'm comfortable with, but I think that at this point, that's prudent to do. We are pulling out the proposed evaluation team chair at Salisbury. There was it's currently it's a full-time position that's half-time evaluation team chair and half-time special education teacher. Due to some staff transition, we feel like we can make that work, with that 1.0 being half and half. And I believe Jim's confident that there will be no loss in services provided there, both in student services as well as the monitoring through the ETC position. So that was a proposed increase of $41,317. So that is saved. For special education contracted services, we had gone back and forth with pulling some of the proposed special education teachers out. We need to keep those in. Those are not optional at this point. So Dave is trimming confidently, semi-confidently, saying we can pull another $10,000 out of contracted services. Those lines, the contracted services was supporting services for that program at Newbury Elementary that this teacher will fill in the gap with. And also there was an out-of-district student who we were planning for not graduating, but at this point you are very confident that student will graduate, which means that they don't continue on into the 18 to 22 age bracket for services. They graduate from it's actually a collaborative program, correct? So that saves $40,000 that we had planned for. At Newbury Elementary School, we had planned for 3 instructional assistants. We're actually going to increase by 2.4. So it's 2 IAs with the benefits, which we budget for $30,500. And then there's actually a 0.6 IA that is already benefit eligible, that we are just going to take that person up to 100%. So we end up able to back out $24,500 from the proposed spending. At the middle school level, there was an IA at the high school that had been budgeted for and planned for this year that actually did not get filled. And so because we have that, and that's been finalized and agreed, we do not need to add that person right now, then that funding can move forward and be transferred over to the middle school, so we can add funding for 1, not 2. And then at Pine Grove School, this looks more shocking than it is. We're not reducing kindergarten sections and increasing class sizes. It's just based on the enrollments that we know right now for kindergarten. The total kindergarten class is going to be smaller. So that being the case, we have 3 full-time in 1 half-day section now, and it's looking like 2 full-day and 2 half-day, which would mean 3 full-time teachers and IAs, which means there's a half a teacher FTE and half an IA FTE that can be reduced at Pine Grove. So the total spending reductions from the tentative budget is $325,747. And then you add on the additional revenue that we're proposing from excess and deficiency of $32,000, and you get the total decrease from the tentative to the final of $357,747. So in the green box, you have a comparison changes from the tentative to final. So the tentative had Newbury at $9.1 million. They go back to $8.99 million, which is a decrease in their assessment from tentative of $114,751, and again, we're talking decreases from tentative here. So that's a 1.34% backwards. Rowley was proposed at 8.445. They would go back to 8.328. So that's 116,000 less than the tentative. And Salisbury was proposed at 9.843, and they would go back to 9.716, a decrease of 126,000, again, making up that 357,747. So that's the showing from tentative to final, and in the yellow box on the bottom, you have, compared, as you see it on page 18 in the budget, you have the FY14 final budget that was adjusted in September, and then the FY15 request as finalized. So you can see in the end, we were initially proposing a 5.3 5.38% increase in the average to the towns and their assessments, and it pulls back to an average 4%. If you want, I mean, if you look on page 18, you have that again in more detail. And you have the full breakdown of the revenues and expenditure summary there. Again, the minimum locals have not been adjusted. We are assuming them as we did from the governor's budget. My understanding is there isn't a local aid resolution that may be passed as of tomorrow that would solidify the Chapter 70 numbers as is. And if that is the case, then it would solidify the minimum local contributions, which would give us more confidence in these numbers here as they are presented. The only other thing I'd like to point out, if you look on page 22, we had talked about after the tentative budget, we proposed not replacing the 3 retirees. And again, they are not all Salisbury retirees, but at the elementary level, a net reduction of 3 classroom teachers. The numbers were working out that it was grades 3, 5, and 6 at Salisbury. In talking to Mr. Montanari, the 3rd grade was not the grade to do that with. And so we're proposing that's happening at 4th grade instead. So it takes class sizes in the 4th grade to 21s for 4th grade. Again, not perfect, but not outlandish. And I think that the point here is that this, again, it's changed from what you saw a week ago, from what you saw a week before that, a week before that. Enrollments will continue to fluctuate right through September of next year. This budget confirms that we're reducing 3 elementary teachers. And I think at this point, this is what it looks like. By the time we get to September, it could look very different. But this budget commits to a reduction of 3 classroom teachers at the elementary level. So other than that, as I said, pages 1 through 10 kind of give you a red line of the changes of what you approved as a tentative budget. And unless there are specific questions, the only other document you have in front of you is the 1-page summary that's been updated, a couple minor updates. That gives you a 1-page summary of the budget proposal. As folks talk about and ask questions, that gives you a snapshot of our spending plan for next year, along with some key history.
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Brian?
Well, I just want to thank the central office administration and actually the administrators from all of the schools for really putting in extra work this week to make sure that we were doing everything we could to not overspend on anything that wasn't absolutely mandated or necessary as a cost avoidance expense.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Paul?
Brian, I just have a question. Where you say that using the E&D is going to be against our auditor's recommendations, does that affect our bond rating at all? Or
It does not. I mean, if ideally we would have the auditor's recommendation is that you have 3% of your operating, call it roughly $1 million for us, and then if it gets to 5%, you by law have to appropriate it as an assessment offset. But no, I mean, they like to see that. That certainly gives them more confidence, but it's never hurt our bond rating. And we've never gone anywhere near the 3% cap. I mean, we've generally hovered between 0.5% and 1.5%, maybe up as high as 2%.
Anyone else?
Can I add one more thing?
Of course.
Just in defense of excess and deficiency, I think it's safe to say, and I haven't said anything to you about this, but a lot of these assumptions where, when I say we're going to take 40,000 more out of special ed tuitions and we're going to trim here, we're making some assumptions, and those assumptions could change in 48 hours. We don't think they are, but again, this is a best guess at this point in time. So I think more than ever, as we're making some very aggressive assumptions, the importance of our excess and deficiency is our only safety net. If we have a student, which has happened, that all of a sudden could move into town and cost us $325,000 for an outside placement. So I think more than ever, we need to keep that excess and deficiency. Again, it's not the best choice to move it, but I think at this point it is prudent to use the 100,000. But just, in defense of keeping a relatively stable balance, it's something we need to do.
I would also like to reiterate the thanks to all of the building administrators and all of the central office for really working hard to look back at the budget and come up with an additional $357,000 in savings over what we looked at last week. That's, I think that's, Jane just said that's amazing and very much appreciated. And I think it was definitely a team effort. Before we vote, I would like to remind the public of the meetings that we have held. We have called meetings that were not held because the attendance was not there. But meetings that were held along this budget process. In January, we had 3 evening meetings that were open to the public. They were held here. On those 3 evenings, the administrators from the building and people from central office made presentations as to what they felt they needed in their programs. There were dollar amounts attached to that. Again, that was an open meeting. That was 3 evenings in January. On the Saturday morning, we also had an open meeting in here, right here, where we as a committee discussed all of it. All of it. That was open to the public. I believe Dave Peterson was there, right, Dave? Yeah. And I don't, I'm just saying that we've had these meetings that were specifically devoted to the budget, 3 nights in January and a Saturday morning. And attendance was very sparse, very, very, very sparse. So I'm sorry that no one was at those meetings to be able to be involved in the discussions from the ground floor when we were starting to, well, we had begun the process of building the budget, but we did have those. I think it's important that everybody understands that. All right, now, on to the budget. The resolution after the budget, before the budget.
In order to begin discussion about it, I think we need to make a motion.
We do. Both of them.
With that resolution as part of the language. You think that's the way to proceed?
Well, there is a, what were you going to say, Brian?
I think you can open with the resolution. And
Yeah.
as long as the second 2 pieces where you delineate the exact operating assessment and assessment to the towns.
Right.
That's explicitly.
So I would like a motion to adopt a resolution that the school committee approves the fiscal year 15 final budget as presented, subject to its subsequently reopening the budget at the formal request of the towns of Newbury, Rowley, and Salisbury, based on the state making additional revenue available to the school committee above that assumed in the approved FY15 final budget.
May I?
Motion that the school committee
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Robin. Go ahead.
that the school committee approves the FY15 final budget as presented, subject to its subsequent reopening the budget at the formal request of the towns of Rowley, Newbury, Rowley, and Salisbury, based on the state making additional revenue available to the school committee above that assumed in the approved FY15 final budget.
Could we have a second on that?
I second that.
Any discussion on that resolution or the adopting of that resolution? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Now I will make a motion, and then we will be able to have discussion if there's anyone that wants to have any further discussion. I'd like a motion to approve a fiscal 2015 final operating budget of $36,928,734 with assessments to the town of Newbury of $8,993,686, the town of Rowley in the amount of $8,328,862, and the town of Salisbury in the amount of $9,716,786.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. I'd like a motion to approve a final capital assessment budget of $2,855,250 with assessments to the town of Newbury in the amount of $169,167, to the town of Raleigh in the amount of $171,727, and to the town of Salisbury in the amount of $754,811.
So moved.
We have a second? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the report of the superintendent of schools.
Thank you. You've got the report here. I'd just like to draw attention in particular to the reference to the white ribbon breakfast. I reported on this to you last year. This year we took administrators, coaches, and 10 male student athletes to the white ribbon breakfast, which was addressed by Dr. Malcolm Astley, whose 18-year-old daughter was killed by a former boyfriend something like 18 months ago. He gave a very powerful address, which was very well received. I approached him afterwards, and he has agreed to come and talk at the school if we can find an appropriate opportunity. We're now setting up to be involved in the fall with the Northeastern University program, which is essentially about helping young people develop the skills to be non-passive bystanders, to recognize when there are opportunities to intervene in things which are going wrong, which might be lending an ear to somebody who needs to talk something through, or to the point where there's something really wrong going on, and finding a way to stop that. The aim is to educate young men in ways that will essentially eradicate male abuse of females. That's they're hoping to put the Gene Geiger Center out of business. Essentially, that's the goal here. I can add to this list. We had a meeting with representatives of the elementary schools in Newbury today to begin their work on identifying district determined measures as we're required by the state. At Appendix 1 you have documentation that we've been reviewing with the aim of making sure that as we organize field visits that we take every reasonable step to make sure that students with disabilities have opportunity to participate in that. We had an issue in one school a while ago where things didn't go quite right, and so we've modified the visit approval forms to remind the organizers that they need to pre-identify students who may need additional support in order to participate, and to make sure that we take appropriate steps to achieve that. I reported on the changes to the SAT assessment that you may have read about in the paper. I have to tell you, this came as something of a surprise to me. I wasn't aware of it until I read it in the Boston Globe. But you can go on to the College Board website for all the details. I believe I was quoted in the press. I haven't read it, but I have to say I'm somewhat ambivalent about taking out the essay, because it's in writing an essay that students really demonstrate that they're able to synthesize information, reorganize it in order to make a case, and we'll have to see how that goes. I don't know how many of you have liked our Facebook account or contacted our Twitter account, but they are live, and we were working on the website today. That will automatically link with both of them, and certainly our PR media specialist is making a significant contribution in getting news out through the blog, through Twitter, and through Facebook. I think that's all I need to report on, other than to say I haven't provided you with a paper, but the state's arrangements for fingerprinting everybody that we employ is progressing. This year we have to make sure that, well, it's not that we make sure, but we can't employ people, new people, if they haven't been fingerprinted, and go through the FBI arrangements, which reminds me we probably need to revise our letter of appointment to add that to, if we haven't done so already. And you've heard about the cheerleaders. Just wonderful. I was watching a video of them this afternoon. One proud mom sent me a video of what was going on. It's a great achievement. So I think that's all I have at the moment. If you have questions about this report or anything else, I'll do my best as usual to answer.
Does anyone have any questions? I have one. I'm just curious, we had some discussions about the fingerprinting before. Is that in effect as of now?
Yes, there are 5 centres around from kind of Pittsburgh to Beverly. I think Beverly is our nearest. They are going to open many more. And it's going to be a requirement to be employed in a school district that staff do get themselves fingerprinted.
Does that mean that people who've been in the district for 10 years, 20 years, they need to go out and get fingerprinted as well?
They will need to. Not
Okay.
not immediately, but they will need to.
All right, thank you.
I was going to say, by the end of this year, it's anyone we hired after January 1st of last year. So any new hire this year will have to be by July 1st.
Can I ask a question, Deb? As I recall, there was a cost associated with fingerprinting each employee. Is that correct?
That is correct. I think it's 55 and 35.
55 for licensed, 35 for non-licensed.
And is the district absorbing that cost, or are we passing that on to the employee?
No. We're not passing it on. The state is requiring people to have this as a qualification.
Or
to
choice
be
of words,
employed.
agreed.
And that is something that prospective employees and, in due course, current employees will need to take care of.
Jane?
Mr. Farmer, and Mr. Forget, I so commend you, gentlemen, and all the other staff members for taking the young men to the White Ribbon Breakfast. That was just absolutely wonderful. Thank you for what you're doing.
Suzanne?
This doesn't comment to the fingerprinting cost. I mean, teachers have to pay for their own licensure anyhow. So I'm assuming it's the same type of thing.
Yes.
The school doesn't pay the $100 and some odd for our licenses. So, I mean, it's just a cost.
Any more questions on Mr. Farmer's report? Paul?
Mr. Farmer, I'm just wondering if you can give us some commentary on your mid-cycle overview.
Well, that's next on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Are there any more questions on the superintendent's report? Linda?
I also want to commend the administration for thinking of the special education children to make sure that they're able to go on those field trips. I think that was an oversight on everybody's part, and I'm glad to see that it's being corrected.
Anything else on Mr. Farmer's report? All right, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the mid-cycle review evaluation of the superintendent of schools.
I've tried to provide you with text to report on progress to meet the goals that we quite some time ago. The commentary is in bold italics. The first one was a review of grading practice, and you'll see that we have made progress there. The intrusion of district-determined measures has meant that we have had to set the review of assessment and grading in the context of a timeline set by the state to identified district-determined measures. You will know from previous reports that we are trying to approach that in a thoughtful manner. Interestingly, I had an email about 10 days ago, well, maybe I did, or the Chief Academic Officer initially got an email saying that the DESE was unready to review a request for a modification of our race to the top of race because we haven't supplied them with any pilot DDMs. I responded and drew attention to prior correspondence with the DESE in relation to the approach that we are taking, and a little while later they said we were okay and that we're making progress. You'll see here that we're trying to roll this out, starting with the high school program coordinators, middle school subject leaders, to get them ready to then support their departments as all the faculty have been involved. We had a preparatory session with elementary school math and ELA specialists to put them in a position to help their colleagues. And this afternoon we had a meeting of representatives from all the elementary schools, all grade levels, to begin work on the elementary district determined measures. We have to have them all together in the elementary schools because teachers who are teaching the same course, their DDMs have to be the same. And so there has to be, the other area where we need to do it is in algebra, where it's taught in both the high school and the middle school. I think we had a very positive meeting today, and we'll continue to make progress. The state still assumes that we are piloting this year. My assumption is we're mostly going to be piloting next year. The state has still not provided guidelines on district-determined measures for a variety of groups of staff, including special education teachers, counsellors, school nurses, or indeed administrators. And it's obviously, I mean, we can think what they might be going to say to us. I contacted the DSE official a little while ago, and it's kind of in the mail, but we haven't got it yet. So I think we're making satisfactory and thoughtful progress on that. But certainly overall, the thing is, the whole thing is going slower because we need to absorb this additional task. In terms of ensuring the outcomes of assessment are useful, valid, and reliable, we began discussions with the teaching and learning team last year. You've seen the criteria that we've established for reviewing assessments, and that's going to be an important resource to further work. In terms of getting the grading and reporting right, I don't believe we can do this by September 2014. I think that's going to have to be revised to June 2015 because there just isn't the time to do it. What we are doing is we are piloting an Aspen-based electronic report card, and that seems to be going well. And hopefully we will move from piloters to early adopters to general adoption before too long. The DDM part of it I've already reported on. And I've put some checks by the implementation plan on page 13 to indicate how we're going there. Shall I stop there in case there are questions on that goal?
Does anyone have any questions on that goal for Mr. Farmer? Okay.
The professional practice goal is intended to be supportive of the work that I've just been describing. And you'll see that it was about extending my personal knowledge about the issues. And you'll see that DESE guidelines are available, have been reviewed. They've published 8 webinars so far. And I did drop in on a recent PARC webinar and have been reviewing public. There's a huge amount to read. If you go online at the moment and look at DDMs and PARC, there's a huge amount to read, and I rely very much upon the lady to my right to kind of keep me on track on this. Review of literature. We've identified a body of literature which is informing our thinking. The name Marzano is one of the leading thinkers and researchers on this, and all the teaching and learning leadership team have copies of that text, Transforming Classroom Grading. I did suggest as part of my work that I be reviewing advisories on DDMs introduced in other states. I'm not doing that because the prevailing view is that we ought to be looking at current assessments and seeing how far those things that we are already doing can either be used as is or modified to be DDMs, rather than looking around for something new, because there's enough new going on in teachers' work at the moment. I've reviewed then the literature references above. And in terms of webinars and professional development, the Chief Academic Officer and I did attend a useful invitation conference led by Dr. John Cronin of the Northwest Evaluation Association, a gentleman who's a little bit skeptical as to whether or not PARCC will actually fly. Let me just give you an illustration of that. We had a webinar recently where we learned that every student computer, if the computer's like one of these, rather than the Chromebook that can be managed centrally, somebody is going to have to go in to each computer and freeze, I'm not sure that's the right word, any kind of automatic updating that goes on in the computer through its normal business, in such a way that the only kind of input will come from the PARCC test. And my understanding, that would have to be done computer by computer by computer by computer. I really don't think that the people who are developing these very interesting and challenging ideas have a sense of what it will actually mean on the ground to set up testing across grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 10. But that's a little editorial on the side. Shall I stop there in case you have questions about that part of the report?
Any questions on that section? No? Okay.
The second year of the pilot evaluation system, this has not been at the top of the agenda. We've had a conversation with the leadership about how it's going. We'll have another one tomorrow with all the principals, assistant principals, in a similar light. I can tell you that the prevailing experience is that the number of visits to classrooms, unscheduled visits to classrooms, is really unmanageable. That's probably not surprising. It was always going to be easy to reduce them rather than to try to increase them through the pilot. And given that if supervisors see something which is a matter of concern, they must automatically revisit the classroom within 30 days for 30 minutes, probably means that we can, as we review the pilot 2 at the end of the year, reduce the kind of mandated number of visits. We did have some difficulty at the start of the year getting at archived materials from last year. I believe that has now been sorted out, and next year we will be able to get at the previous year's data more recently. As far as the teachers are concerned, I visited with the association's executive board fairly recently, and evaluation was, they had some other issues, but evaluation wasn't one of the ones that came up that was a matter of concern. Shall I stop there? See if there are questions.
Robin?
I have a question regarding student feedback. Is that part of that I mean, I know there was talk that it might become part of it. Is it part of the language? Is it something you're discussing, or?
Well, that's not part of the evaluation arrangements. There was a question around including in the district development plan around the not the retell, the mass-tell. Is that what you're referring to, the kind of
Actually not,
climate?
because I feel like at one of the sessions that I attended on the new teacher evaluation, that there was discussion in that at the Mass Association of School Committees conference about whether student feedback on was considered as part of the teacher
The state still intends to introduce feedback for teachers from students and administrators from families. They're at the moment delaying that because I think they're realizing that we can't manage that at the present time. I think they've delayed it by a year. We certainly haven't received any guidelines yet on that, but it's still on the books.
Paul?
Ms. Farmer, I'm just wondering, under the commentary section, it says pressure of other business has meant that little attention has been given to the issue. When you use the word other business, what are you referring to?
All the business that I've been referring to over the course of the year, district determined measures. We have the retail training that is largely handled by chief academic officer. We've got an interesting budget. Generally speaking, I think that people across the district are working way above and beyond, I'm not talking about myself, what you would normally expect. As I said in my very opening remarks, there seems to be very little routine about running a school or running a class at the moment, because all the time people are absorbing changes.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Farmer?
Shall I take you briefly through the last part? Sorry, two more parts. Improving transitions. We've continued to do work on that. Fairly recently, we had a very useful meeting, not directly related to the action plan here, reviewing those new forms that we introduced last year. You'll know that we had representatives from the Special Education Parent Advisory Council come and give us some advice, and we're responding to that. I think I may have copied to you a letter that's going out from the middle school to elementary school families, setting out all the steps that we are taking to help the transition from 6 to 7. This is essentially about the fallout from the merger proposal. This is, I'd say, not going well. We have drafted papers. Informal discussion with the Teachers Association suggests that staff would not be willing to take on the broader role without a reduction in their teaching load. I had suggested a higher stipend for that, recognizing the additional work. The concern is that if we reduce the teaching load, we essentially explode the middle school teams if a middle school teacher were to take on that responsibility. I find it difficult to put in place arrangements that would preclude a middle school teacher from being a leader of a 7-12 arrangement. So I don't believe this is going to come to fruition, certainly this year, and therefore we will need to go back to a plan B in order to do that. I have talked with the principal of the high school and the middle school about establishing a 7-12 academic board, which will bring together the curricular leaders from middle school and high school, but instead of the schools driving that bus, it would be the chief academic officer and I driving that bus. As you know, I think schools should have a good deal of autonomy, and I would rather they have that responsibility. But if we can't achieve it that way, then we need to find another way of making sure that people are talking appropriately about important things to make sure that transitions go well. What I've just said is not kind of general public knowledge, so I apologize if I've surprised anybody. And then, I thought, actually, Mrs. Williams, you were referring to Goal 5, which is about climate. No progress on that to date. I discovered quite by chance recently that the high school has been working with the Harvard Graduate School of Education using a survey that the university has produced or is using. They have administered it to students, and they're going to administer it to staff. Once I see the outcome of that, then we'll try and do something that complements that rather than replicates it. And as you know, that the TELMAS survey has been open. It's now closed. I'm not sure what percentage of our staff have participated. I need to work on that. So some work has gone on, but it's not being driven by me at the moment.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Farmer? Robin?
Well, I guess my question is, I feel like we had this whole new superintendent evaluation process we're piloting, and it's new to us too, that if you're challenged in being able to make progress in some of these goals because of the everyday things in life that happen and what are unforeseeable and are going on, is now the time to modify the goals so that when we get to the end of year evaluation, your evaluation is fair and accurate to your work? And so do those goals need to be modified knowing what you're going to be facing for the next several months and what you have encountered, so that we see, even if it's progress in other areas but not where the goal was originally set, that you're evaluated fairly as opposed to it looking like you didn't meet your goals?
Right. Well, the goals were set over a 2-year period. The only point where I suggest that there's a deadline that I can't meet is on page 12C. And you'll see there a due date for this work may need to be revised to June 2015. The original goal was 2014. These goals are, in a sense, a little bit artificial in that they're things we really want to do, but there are things outside our control that get in the way of that. Otherwise, I feel okay about them, and will continue to work as hard as I can on them.
Thank you for bringing that up, Robin. Paul?
Ms. Farmer, I'm just wondering, the last issue that you talked about was the improving transitions, and I think I heard you say that you'd really like the schools to work with the continuity of the material from 7 through 12. Did I understand that right?
Correct.
To the extent that they're not able to, it would be my hope that the central office would take steps to work on that, because it's critical for everyone to be working from the same page of material. And I'm glad that your chief academic officer is nodding her head. It's important to me, and I just wanted to share that with you. Okay?
Well, I did say that Plan B looks like establishing an academic board, 7-12, that would involve the curriculum leaders from the middle school and the high school, a body that I'm not quite sure exactly who would chair it, but the chief academic officer and I would essentially do that. We might have co-chairs with the principals, recognizing their responsibilities, but that's where my thinking is going. We're not letting it drop.
Does anyone else have any questions on Mr. Farmer's
Maybe I
material?
could just say that down here there's a common middle school, high school schedule. I do say in here that cannot be achieved this September. It would have to be ready now. And I think I do mention in here that there has been discussions with the middle school around its master schedule, which is old-fashioned. If you compare the breadth of opportunity at some neighboring middle schools, there's much greater opportunity because each year everybody goes through the same wheel, and there's no opportunity for students to take electives, to study some subjects in depth, which can be achieved by having a longer week, having some subjects taught every other day rather than every day. There are various ways in which that can be achieved. So I've asked the middle school to think about their end of that. The high school has had a staff committee looking at their master schedule. And I think it'll be easier to have the conversation when each school is clear about where it thinks it would like to go, and sort of bringing things together rather than driving it from the centre.
Thank you.
Sorry.
That's okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Next on the agenda, the subcommittee reports. First one is the policy subcommittee, but Linda Lukovsky.
We have not met.
Okay. Finance subcommittee, Robin.
We were unable to meet in February because with only 3 people on the committee, we need 2 for a quorum, and we had family health emergencies on that day. So we had told the committee last time we met if they needed us to reschedule before next month, we would, but I think we can accomplish all our routine and expected business at our meeting next Tuesday.
Thank you. Personnel and negotiation subcommittee, Dina.
We have continued to meet with the teachers and are making progress, and our next meeting is March 26th. It's also noted here that the superintendent and assistant superintendent have met with the IAs to begin preliminary discussions on possible changes to their contract, and we will begin meeting with them shortly as well.
Any questions on that report? Before we adjourn, I would again, well, I just want to again thank the full committee and the administration for really coming to the table and doing the task that we're charged to do, because I think it was tough, and I think everybody did a really great job. Our next meeting, our next regularly scheduled meeting is April 9th. Could we have a motion to adjourn?
I just have one issue I'd like to
I'm
raise
sorry. I thought you
before we
wanted to
get to
move
that
to
motion.
adjourn. Sorry.
And I may have missed this, and I apologize to the committee if I did, but if this cheering squad is going to be going to Florida in April, and I know it's an if, do we need to deal with that now for the out-of-town thing? Out-of-town visit? No. I just say because we're March, but I just raise it.
No, that's good. That's a valid question.
I can tell you that I'm meeting with the athletic director and the principal tomorrow to have a discussion about that and the feasibility of even getting a team down to Florida. So, yep.
But thank you for bringing that up. That was a good question.
Other than that, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay. Do we have a second? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much.